I still remember the harsh fluorescent lights in Greg's office that morning. How they made his fake smile look even more plastic as he leaned back in his leather chair. I stood there, folder pressed against my chest like a shield, as he spoke those words that made my stomach drop. "Claire, we need to trim the fat around here. You're just too expensive for what we need now." My hands tightened on the folder. 6 years I'd given to Wellington Motors. 6 years of building their sales from a struggling local dealership into a regional powerhouse. I'd trained every rep, designed every successful pitch deck, and nurtured client relationships that paid for Greg Wellington's beach house. I looked him straight in the eyes. "The Hamilton Fleet account is closing next week. They'll need—" "Chelsea will handle it," he cut me off, nodding toward the hallway. That's when I saw her through the glass wall. 24 years old. Bright smile, designer clothes, scrolling through her phone as she waited to take my job. For half my salary I'd later learn. "The severance details are all here." Greg slid a folder across his desk. "You understand business, Claire, nothing personal." I took the folder without a word, my face perfectly calm. But inside, something cold and certain settled in my chest. I knew exactly what I was worth. Soon enough he would too. The walk back to my office felt endless. Coworkers glanced up, then quickly away, eyes darting back to computer screens. They knew. Of course they knew. In a company like Wellington Motors, news of a firing spread faster than a sale on luxury convertibles. My hands didn't shake as I packed my belongings into a cardboard box. Family photo, coffee mug, the awards hidden in my bottom drawer that Greg never acknowledged. 6 years of work reduced to a box you could carry with one arm. Mark from accounting hovered at my door, his face pale. "Claire, this is crazy. We all know." "It's okay," I said quietly. "Really." But it wasn't. Not for Wellington Motors anyway. As I packed my things, I could see Chelsea being led around by Greg. Her laugh echoed down the hallway as he introduced her to the sales team. I watched their faces, the forced smiles, the uncertain glances. My team knew what Greg didn't, that I was the foundation, not the fat. In the elevator down, I stood beside Thomas, our best fleet sales rep. He stared straight ahead. "The Hamilton account won't sign without you," he whispered. I just nodded, clutching my box tighter. Outside, I placed my belongings in my car, slid the severance check into my purse, and drove away without looking back. No tears, no anger, just quiet certainty about what would come next. The first cracks appeared 3 days later. My phone buzzed with texts from Thomas. "Chelsea mixed up the Henderson and Hamilton accounts, sent confidential pricing to the wrong client." I didn't respond. 2 days after that, she told Mr. Hamilton his input was unnecessary during contract review. Mr. Hamilton, who'd spent 40 years building his company from nothing, who insisted on reviewing every line of every contract himself. I scrolled through the messages but left them all on read. This wasn't my problem anymore. Through mutual connections, I heard about Chelsea's Instagram posts from the office, selfies in Greg's chair, captions about revitalizing an outdated sales approach and bringing fresh energy to Wellington Motors. 15,000 followers watched as she promised to transform the company. Meanwhile, my phone rang constantly with calls from clients. I let them all go to voicemail. Each message sounded more desperate than the last. "Claire, there's been a mistake with our invoice. We were promised delivery by Thursday. Nobody's returning our calls." Greg had made his choice. Now he would live with it. At night, I sat on my balcony sipping tea, feeling strangely calm. I had options. Several competitors had already reached out with offers, but something told me to wait, to watch, to let gravity do its work. 2 weeks after my departure, the Hamilton fleet deal collapsed. $3 million and 14 vehicles, gone. I learned about it from Sarah in finance, who texted me during her lunch break. Total disaster. Mr. Hamilton walked out mid-meeting, said he doesn't do business with amateurs. I could picture it clearly. Chelsea, overwhelmed and underqualified, trying to close a deal she didn't understand the foundations of. Greg hovering nervously, watching his commission vanish. Mr. Hamilton, with his old-school principles and fierce loyalty, seeing right through them both. That deal had taken me 8 months to build. Countless dinners, careful negotiations, building trust through consistent follow-through, all unraveled in a single meeting. Later that night, Thomas called. I picked up this time. Greg's blaming the economy, he said, his voice low, saying the deal was shaky from the start. He called an emergency sales meeting to regroup and reimagine our approach to major accounts. And how did that go? I asked, my first words about Wellington since I'd left. Chelsea suggested we focus on our Instagram presence to attract younger fleet managers. The silence between us said everything. Claire, Thomas sounded tired. This place is falling apart without you. I looked out my window at the quiet street below. I know, I said simply. By the 1-month mark, Wellington Motors was showing serious symptoms of systemic failure. The CRM system I'd customized and maintained lay in digital ruins. Chelsea had attempted to streamline it, deleting fields she deemed unnecessary, fields that tracked customer preferences, service history, and parts inventory. Critical data, gone with a few careless clicks. The quarterly forecasts went out with figures so wildly optimistic that 3 major investors called the board directly with concerns. The sales pipeline looked like Swiss cheese, full of holes where follow-ups had been missed and relationships neglected. Meanwhile, I started my sabbatical, 6 months of paid time to myself, a gift I'd never expected. I enrolled in Italian language classes at the community college, planted tomatoes and herbs in my small garden, slept past 6 a.m. for the first time in years. Each morning, I checked my investments and savings. I had been careful with my money all these years. I could wait. I had time. I didn't check LinkedIn, didn't scan industry news. But information found me anyway, through former colleagues who couldn't help but share the unfolding disaster. Greg's telling everyone the software is broken, Mark texted. But we all know Chelsea just doesn't understand how to use it. I replied with a single gardening emoji. Sometimes silence speaks volumes. 6 weeks in, the first dealership closed. The smallest in their network, a satellite location in Raleigh that I'd fought to keep open because it served a loyal customer base. Chelsea had deemed it inefficient. Greg had agreed, failing to consider the maintenance contracts and referral business it generated. The closure made the local business news. A small paragraph, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. 23 people lost their jobs. That same week, 2 senior account managers resigned. Both had been with Wellington for over a decade. Both had clients who followed them to their new employers. I received a gift basket from one of them, expensive wine and chocolate with a simple note, "Thank you for everything you taught me. They never deserved you." I placed it on my counter, unopened. In my garden, the first green shoots were appearing. Growth takes time, so does decay. During my Italian class, my phone vibrated constantly in my bag. 7 missed calls by the time I checked, all from Wellington's headquarters. I declined to return them. That evening, Thomas sent me a 1-line text, "Bonuses canceled until further notice." I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop. Not to check work emails or industry news, but to research cooking classes in Tuscany. My sabbatical was just beginning. Wellington's decline was accelerating. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. 2 months passed. I fell into a peaceful rhythm far removed from the corporate chaos I'd left behind. Mornings in my garden, afternoons practicing Italian or meeting friends for lunch, friends who'd previously been scheduled into brief slots between client calls. Evenings cooking elaborate meals for one in my quiet kitchen. I didn't dwell on Wellington Motors, didn't seek out information about their struggles. But like water finding cracks in a foundation, the news seeped through anyway. A former colleague spotted me at the farmer's market. "The Charlotte dealership is on the brink," he said, examining a tomato with too much focus. "They've lost 3 major service contracts in a month." I just nodded and selected a basket of strawberries. My neighbor, whose brother worked in commercial real estate, mentioned casually, heard Wellington Motors might be putting their main showroom up for sale, trying to lease it back to free up capital. "Is that so?" I replied, neutral as Switzerland. At night, I sat on my balcony watching the stars, feeling neither joy nor sorrow at Wellington's troubles. Just a calm certainty that actions have consequences. That value, real value, eventually makes itself known, through its presence or its absence. I was healing. Wellington was not. In my garden, the tomato plants grew stronger each day. I staked them carefully, patiently. Some things can't be rushed. 3 months after my departure, the cracks in Greg's facade began to show. Thomas called me after a particularly brutal sales meeting. He completely lost it, he whispered, clearly stepping away from others to make the call. Flipped over a chair when Chelsea presented the quarterly numbers, started yelling about incompetence and laziness. I could picture it vividly. Greg's red face, the vein pulsing in his forehead that appeared whenever things slipped from his control, the stunned silence of the room. Chelsea's expensive makeup failing to hide her humiliation. The board member who was visiting looked like he'd seen a ghost. Thomas continued. Left immediately after, didn't even stay for the catered lunch. I sat in my garden, phone pressed to my ear, watching bees move methodically between my flowering herbs. Nature doesn't rush, yet everything gets accomplished. Claire. Thomas's voice dropped lower. 3 regions are in the red now. There are rumors about lawsuits from the Raleigh closure. Greg's blaming the economy, competition, even the weather. Everything except his own decisions. And Chelsea? I asked, my first question about her since leaving. Completely overwhelmed. She cried in the bathroom for an hour after the meeting. I felt a flicker of sympathy. Chelsea wasn't the villain in this story. She was just unqualified for a role she should never have been offered. Take care of yourself, Thomas, I said softly before hanging up. 4 months in, and Wellington Motors was officially in crisis. The Wilmington dealership missed payroll. Staff received checks 5 days late with mumbled excuses about banking errors. 2 more salespeople quit that same week. Vendors began demanding payment up front, no longer trusting Wellington's credit. Parts deliveries slowed, then stopped entirely from some suppliers. Customers with vehicles in for service waited weeks instead of days. I heard all this from Sarah in finance, who called me in tears one evening. Claire, it's a nightmare. We're juggling funds between accounts just to keep the lights on. Greg's telling the board one thing and the staff another. I listened quietly, offering comfort but no solutions. This wasn't my mess to clean up. The worst part? Sarah's voice cracked. Chelsea's still posting happy Instagram stories about crushing sales goals while we're drowning. It's like we're living in parallel universes. That night, I checked Chelsea's Instagram for the first time. Between filtered photos of luxury cars and motivational quotes, I saw the desperate performance of someone trying to project success while everything crumbled around her. I clicked away and closed my laptop. Outside, a gentle rain watered my garden. My tomatoes were ripening now, small green fruits growing larger by the day. Time was doing exactly what I'd known it would. Revealing truth, separating substance from appearance, rewarding patience. Around the 5-month mark, something unexpected happened. A major client reached out to me directly, not to beg me to return or complain about Wellington's failures, but to share something strange. They sent us a proposal yesterday, he said. And Claire, it was your proposal. Your exact words, your structure. They just changed the date and some numbers. I wasn't surprised. In desperate times, people grasp at whatever worked before. The irony, he continued, they're using your work, but they can't deliver on any of it without you. It's like they're ghosts trying to wear your clothes. Later that week, I received a similar call from another client, then another, all with the same story. Wellington recycling my work, my strategies, my relationships, none with my results. Meanwhile, my garden flourished. My Italian improved. I booked that cooking class in Tuscany, a 6-week immersion in January. Life continued to unfold pleasantly. One evening, as I chopped fresh basil from my garden for dinner, my phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months, Greg Wellington. I watched it ring until it stopped. 10 minutes later, a voicemail notification appeared. I finished preparing my meal, ate slowly on my balcony, and washed the dishes before finally listening to his message. Claire. Greg's voice sounded strained. We should talk. Maybe we overcorrected. Call me back. I deleted the message without a second thought. Greg's desperate attempts to reach me intensified over the next week. Emails first. Claire, let's discuss your return. Excellent terms available. Then text messages. The board is asking about you. Can we meet? A delivery arrived at my door. An expensive gift basket much larger than the one I'd received months earlier. The card read simply, "We made a mistake. Greg." I donated the contents to a local shelter and recycled the card. 3 days later, a handwritten letter appeared in my mailbox. 4 pages of Greg's messy scrawl, full of explanations and justifications thinly disguised as apologies. Market pressures and restructuring necessities featured prominently. The words, "I'm sorry," appeared only once, buried in the third paragraph. I read it through carefully, then filed it away with my severance papers. Evidence, not sentiment. That evening, Thomas called. "Greg's going crazy trying to reach you," he said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "He kept asking if anyone knows what you're doing, if you've taken another job." "And what did you tell him?" I asked, curious despite myself. "I told him that unlike him, we respect your privacy." Thomas paused. "Claire, it's getting worse here. The board is asking questions no one wants to answer." I looked out at my thriving garden, heavy with summer produce. "Sometimes silence is the most powerful response," I said quietly. Thomas understood perfectly. "I'll keep you posted," he promised. 6 months after my departure, Wellington Motors began its final descent. 3 more senior staff members quit in a single week. A department head walked out mid-meeting when Greg suggested they just need to work harder. Chelsea had stopped coming to strategy sessions entirely, claiming she needed to focus on client relationships that barely existed anymore. The board was now fielding daily calls from investors. Bankruptcy rumors swirled. The Charlotte dealership closed its doors without warning, triggering a flurry of negative press. All this information reached me through various channels: former colleagues, industry connections, local news. I absorbed it all with quiet detachment. My tomatoes were fully ripe now, sweet and perfect. I made sauce and froze it in small batches for winter. My Italian was conversational, my garden abundant. The sabbatical I'd never planned had become a gift beyond measure. Then came the call I'd been subconsciously waiting for. Not from Greg, but from Richard Bennett, head of Wellington's board of directors. "Ms. Monroe." His voice was formal, cautious. "I believe we have matters to discuss that would benefit us both. Would you be willing to meet? Neutral location of your choosing, of course." I considered for a moment, feeling the weight of 6 months of silence, growth, and distant observation. "The Granville Hotel, tomorrow at 2 p.m. I said simply. "We'll be there," Richard replied, relief evident in his voice. The Granville Hotel's executive suite offered sweeping views of the city. I arrived 15 minutes early, dressed simply but professionally. No power suit, no intimidation tactics. I didn't need them. At exactly 2 p.m., Richard Bennett arrived with 2 other board members. No Greg, no Chelsea, just the decision-makers, faced with salvaging what remained of Wellington Motors. "Thank you for meeting us," Richard began, unusually humble for a man who controlled businesses worth billions. "I'll be direct. Wellington Motors is in serious trouble." I nodded but offered nothing. "The changes implemented after your departure have not been successful," he continued, carefully avoiding words like firing or replacement. "We've lost significant market share, client trust, and staff loyalty." The woman beside him, Patricia, from legal, opened a folder. "We've conducted a thorough review of the company's decline. The timing correlates precisely with your exit." I sat quietly, hands folded in my lap. Let them fill the silence. Richard cleared his throat. "To be blunt, Miss Monroe, we made a serious error in judgment, one that has cost us dearly." "And now you'd like me to fix it," I said, my first words since greeting them. They exchanged glances. "We would like to discuss your return." "Yes," Richard confirmed. I allowed myself a small smile. "I'm not looking to return, but if I were, here's what I'd need." I opened my own folder and slid a single sheet across the table. Their eyes widened as they read my terms. My terms were clear, concise, and non-negotiable. Complete operational control. Back pay for the 6 months since my termination. A 25% raise for my previous salary. A commission structure tied directly to my team's performance. A formal, written acknowledgement of wrongful termination to be kept in company records. I watched their faces as they read. No outrage, no surprise, just the grim recognition of people who knew they had no leverage. "These terms are substantial," Richard said carefully. "So is the damage done to Wellington Motors," I replied evenly. "You're not just rehiring a sales operations manager, you're asking me to rebuild what Greg dismantled." Patricia frowned at the last item. "The formal acknowledgement of wrongful termination could create legal exposure for the company. It stays internal," I clarified. "I'm not interested in public humiliation or lawsuits. I want the record to be accurate, that's all." They asked for a moment and stepped out into the hallway. Through the partially open door, I heard urgent whispers, the occasional word breaking through. No choice, and board pressure, and only option. 10 minutes later, they returned. Richard extended his hand. We accept your terms, Miss Monroe, all of them. I shook his hand firmly. I'll need the agreement drafted and signed by tomorrow. I start Monday. And Greg? Patricia asked carefully. That's the board's decision, I said. But I won't report to him. They nodded in unified understanding. The bridge wasn't burned. It was being rebuilt on my terms. I returned to Wellington Motors on a Monday morning in October. No grand entrance, no announcement. I simply walked through the front doors at 7:30 a.m., badge clipped to my belt, carrying a small plant from my garden for my desk. The receptionist's jaw dropped. Miss Monroe, you're back? I am, I said with a small smile. Is my old office available? It wasn't, of course. Chelsea had taken it. But by 8 a.m., Richard had personally walked me to a larger corner office, previously occupied by a vice president who'd left during the exodus. Word spread like wildfire. By 9 a.m., a steady stream of employees stopped by, expressions ranging from shock to barely concealed joy. Thomas actually hugged me, whispering, "Thank God," against my hair. At 10 a.m., the official email went out company-wide. Claire Monroe returns to Wellington Motors as Director of Operations with expanded authority over sales, service, and client relationships. Greg was notably absent. Chelsea remained in her office with the door closed. By noon, I had my first status meeting with department heads. No recriminations, no "I told you so." Just clear questions, careful listening, and concise direction. First priority is stabilizing client relationships, I told them. Second is rebuilding internal systems. Third is restoring staff confidence. They nodded, relief visible on every face. We've missed you, Sarah from finance said simply. I didn't say I'd missed them too, but perhaps I had more than I'd realized. My first week back was archaeological work. Digging through the ruins to find what could be salvaged. I discovered Chelsea had deleted critical sections of the customer database, believing them redundant. Greg had approved expense accounts for friends while denying necessary maintenance budget. The CRM system was in shambles. Client notes were missing. Service records were incomplete. I worked 14-hour days, meticulously rebuilding what had been destroyed. Not with anger, but with the same quiet focus I'd applied to my garden. Staff fell in behind me without question. The atmosphere shifted palpably, from desperation to cautious hope. On Wednesday, I passed Chelsea in the hallway. Her Instagram-perfect appearance had faded. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back hastily. She looked away quickly. Chelsea, I said, stopping her with just her name. She turned, shoulders tight. They didn't tell me who you really were. She said quietly. Greg said you were just another manager. I nodded. It wasn't your fault. You were set up to fail. Her eyes widened at this unexpected absolution. If you want to learn, I continued, I can show you the systems properly. Your social media expertise could be valuable if properly applied. She stared at me for a long moment. Why would you help me after? Because fixing things is what I do, I replied simply. Think about it. I walked away, leaving her with a choice, pride or growth. By Friday, she had requested a transfer to the marketing department. A better fit for her actual skills. Small victories. Careful rebuilding. One relationship at a time. During my second week, I began the forensic accounting. With Sarah from finance beside me, I unraveled 6 months of mismanagement, buried in spreadsheets and account records. The picture that emerged was worse than anyone had suspected. Greg had falsified reports to the board, shifted losses between dealerships to hide the scale of failure, promised incentives to staff that the company couldn't afford, offered pricing to clients that guaranteed losses on every sale. This is... Sarah trailed off, staring at my monitor. Fraud, I finished quietly. Not just incompetence. I worked through the weekend, compiling everything into a detailed report. 67 pages of data, analysis, and documentation. No emotional language, no accusations, just facts, dates, and figures. The indisputable evidence of Greg's catastrophic leadership. On Sunday night, Thomas stopped by my office with takeout. You're building a case, he observed, watching me organize the final section. I nodded, accepting the container of pad thai. The board needs to understand exactly what happened, not for revenge, but for recovery. And Greg? Thomas asked carefully. I looked up from my work. That's not my decision, but they can't rebuild the company with the person who nearly destroyed it. Thomas smiled slightly. You never wanted his job, did you? Even though you were better at it. I wanted to do my job well, I corrected. That's still all I want. The truth was in the numbers, and numbers don't lie. The board meeting was scheduled for Thursday morning. I arrived with my report bound in a simple black folder. No flash, just substance. Greg was there, fidgeting in his usual seat, his confident facade cracking around the edges. Chelsea was not invited. The room filled with board members, legal counsel, and 2 representatives from the parent company. Richard called the meeting to order. We're here to review the state of Wellington Motors and determine our path forward. Miss Monroe has prepared a comprehensive analysis. I walked them through the findings methodically. Sales decline by region. Client departures with documented reasons. Staff exodus with exit interview data. System failures. Accounting discrepancies. Falsified board reports. Greg's face grew redder with each slide. Twice he tried to interrupt, but Richard silenced him with a raised hand. When I reached the section on financial misrepresentation, Greg finally exploded. This is sabotage, he shouted, standing abruptly. She's manipulating the data to make me look bad. I didn't respond to his outburst. Instead, I calmly pulled up the original reports he'd submitted to the board, side by side with the actual numbers. These figures don't match, I said simply. The discrepancies are not matters of interpretation. The room fell silent as the board members examined the evidence. Is this true, Greg? Richard asked quietly. Greg's bluster collapsed into stammering denials that convinced no one. I closed my laptop. My work was done. The truth had spoken for itself. The board's decision came swiftly. Greg was removed from his position as regional director effective immediately. Not fired. The Wellington family name still carried weight, but demoted to manager of the smallest remaining dealership in Shelby, North Carolina. A rural outpost with 6 cars on the lot and a leaking roof. The announcement went out company-wide by Friday afternoon. No explanation was offered, but none was needed. Everyone knew. I inherited Greg's budget, authority, and responsibility, though not his title. That went to Thomas, who had remained loyal to the company despite everything. I was perfectly content with this arrangement. Titles had never motivated me. Chelsea, as I'd suggested, was officially transferred to marketing as a social media specialist, a role better suited to her actual skills. She avoided me in the hallways, but the Instagram posts about Wellington now featured actual cars instead of selfies, and engagement was up 40%. On Friday evening, Thomas stopped by my office with a bottle of champagne. A proper celebration this time, he said, pouring 2 glasses. I accepted one with a small smile. To Wellington Motors, may its recovery be as remarkable as its decline. To you, Claire, Thomas corrected, raising his glass, for knowing your worth when others didn't. We clinked glasses as the sunset painted the sky outside my new corner office. Recovery had begun. Rebuilding Wellington Motors was like restoring my garden after a storm. Patient, methodical work that couldn't be rushed. I started with the foundations. The CRM system was rebuilt with proper documentation and training. Sales territories were rebalanced based on data rather than favoritism. Incentive structures were redesigned to reward client retention as much as acquisition. Staff who had weathered the storm received recognition and back bonuses. New hires were selected for skill and character rather than connections or Instagram followers. Monthly town halls kept everyone informed and engaged. Clients began to return, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. Mr. Hamilton's fleet account was the first major recovery, won back through a personal visit and a straightforward acknowledgement of past failures. You should have been running this place all along, he told me bluntly over lunch. Could have saved everyone a lot of trouble. I smiled but didn't disagree. By the 3rd month of recovery, the numbers told the story better than words could. Sales up 18%. Client retention improved by 23%. Staff turnover reduced to pre-crisis levels. One afternoon, Sarah brought me the latest financial reports with a grin. We're actually profitable again, she said. The board is impressed. The team did the work, I reminded her. I just gave them the right tools and got out of their way. But we both knew it was more than that. Leadership, real leadership, makes all the difference. Greg's exile to Shelby was the definition of poetic justice. Reports filtered back through the grapevine. His staff consisted of 3 people. His office was a converted storage room with a leaking ceiling. Inventory amounted to 6 used vehicles, and whatever local trade-ins appeared. No assistant, no expense account, no executive privileges. He still received my Monday company updates detailing our recovery progress. I included him professionally, no gloating, just facts. Thomas visited Shelby during his regional tour. He looks like a ghost, he reported, keeps antacids on his desk, jumps at phone calls. He asked if you're still angry, Thomas added. I was never angry, I replied truthfully. Anger requires emotional investment I wasn't willing to give him. In business, as in nature, balance eventually reasserts itself. As Wellington stabilized, our parent company took notice. 6 months into my return, they studied our remarkable turnaround. Their conclusion: Wellington Motors had become a model for operational excellence. Their report credited the exceptional leadership of Claire Monroe. The board adopted our methods across all regions. Greg's name appeared nowhere in the revised business plans. It was as if he'd been quietly erased from corporate memory. My team grew stronger weekly. Thomas thrived as regional director. Chelsea found success in marketing, her social media skills finally properly applied. I arrived one Monday to find my name on a glass plaque: Claire Monroe, Director of Operations and Strategy. That same day, Richard called about an equity package. Your name tops that list, Claire. I thanked him sincerely, not for money, but for validation that building things right matters more than building them quickly. 11 months after my return, a final note arrived from Greg. It came through inter-office mail in his distinctive handwriting. I should have known better. Not everyone is replaceable. Greg. The spelling error spoke volumes about his mental state. I felt neither triumph nor pity, just closure of a chapter best forgotten. I filed it away with my other documents: termination papers, severance agreement, my return terms, the board's apology. That afternoon, I took a rare lunch break in the courtyard. The autumn air was crisp, trees turning brilliant colors. I noticed empty soil near the entrance, perfect for a garden come spring. Thomas joined me with coffee. Planning your next project? He asked, following my gaze. Maybe, I smiled. Every space has potential if you know how to nurture it. Like people, he observed, and companies. 1 year after my firing, Wellington Motors was celebrated as the comeback story of the year by the Regional Business Association. The press highlighted our recovery and innovative approach. Staff morale hit record highs. Client satisfaction exceeded benchmarks. All metrics that had plummeted under Greg now surpassed pre-crisis levels. A journalist dubbed me the strategic savior of Wellington Motors, a flattering but unnecessary title. I was simply doing what I always had: building systems that worked, developing people who thrived, creating lasting value. The difference was that now, others could see it too. The CEO called to discuss my future role at the corporate level. The board is unanimous. I promised to consider it, though my heart remained with the operations I'd rebuilt. That evening, I walked through the quiet showroom. Everything was as it should be. Calm, professional, successful. 18 months after being fired, I attended our staff appreciation event. The showroom buzzed with genuine camaraderie. Where Greg's photo once dominated, a new display showed our core team, including my photo despite my objections. A young sales associate approached me. Miss Monroe, is it true you let yourself get fired because you knew they'd fail without you? I smiled at how rumors had grown. Some painted me as a mastermind, others as a phoenix rising from ashes. No, I told her honestly. I never wanted Wellington to struggle. I just knew what I was worth. They had to lose me to learn it. She nodded. I'm glad you came back. Everyone says this is the best place to work now. Some lessons can only be learned through loss. And sometimes the most powerful statement isn't what you say, it's simply knowing your worth and standing firmly in that truth.